Greetings, travelers! Welcome back to Tales from the Enchanted Forest with your animal companions, Fox and Sparrow.
Bonjour, travelers, and welcome. We are here in the lovely Enchanted Forest where it is starting to get that kind of, thin layer of snow here, meaning we're getting very close to the holidays, which to me is the best time of year. I'm already been full swing holiday mode for a little while now, but I'm just so glad that everyone else is joining me now that we're in December.
You're like, it's September. I've been ready.
I've been ready for so long. Everyone catch up, get in the game.
Well, I feel like this fall hasn't been falling. I don't know what it is.
At least where I've been, it's been a bit more of a condensed fall. Summer kind of trailed for a little bit, and then we had fall in double time, and now we're getting that, little bit of snow happening, so I just didn't get enough fall time, which kind of sucks. But we're at Christmas time, so I can't be mad.
At least here, I think we went from it was snowing at some point in October. Early October, it was snowing. And then end of September, early October. So we were all kind of like, okay, I guess it's going to be winter now. And then that went away and it went straight back into the 20s. And so we've just been coasting, and now we finally have that crisp in the air, you know, when it feels crispy. That crispiness.
The best.
But the sun also goes down because it goes behind the mountain at 2:00. So from 2:00 onwards, it's just dark and dark and dark and dark and cold. I don't know about you, but when it gets dark and cold, I lose the will to do anything.
Gosh.
And as soon as the sun goes behind the mountain, it's freezing. It's horrible. And I think this is just what's going to be the rest of December.
Yay! But then it'll get better.
Yeah, and I think when there's snow, at least there's snow. So at least you have the justification of, okay, but it's snowy. And you spend most of your time on the mountain skiing anyway, so it's not like you're not in the sun.
Fear not. The Holly King is going to lose soon, and the Oak King is going to win, and then summer will slowly come until that cycle repeats. But regardless, we do have a story today.
What? I thought this was us talking about the weather.
I mean, I would not be surprised if one day we just talk for so long at the top of show that we never actually get to a fairy tale. We've come close a couple of times, but that's when we were catching up on stuff. Though we have caught up on what we're currently into right now. Maybe eventually we'll need to catch up, but right now we're good. So anyways, this fall, while it's been kind of a condensed fall, I had been leaning into that kind of spooky season by watching Dimension 20's Never After. Like many Dimension 20 shows, the series was a combo of two different genres, and this series focused on fairy tales and horror. Honestly, the perfect combo for the spooky season. It was really interesting to see the way they kind of explored various fairy tales, even in that horror aspect, which was certainly not my favorite. I think we've talked about this several times before. Neither of us really like horror, but I was very fascinated by the fairy tale element, so I kind of pushed through it. And it turned out to be really fun to see this collection of actors kind of explore different fairy tale themes, all being mashed together in one big fairy tale world, kind of like Shrek. But think of it completely terrifying, you know? And one character kind of who stood out to me was Zach Oyama's take on Puss in Boots, or Pip, as he was kind of known in the series, P.I.B., Puss in Boots. And while many characters were exploring what it meant to be a character trapped in, a story with a very specific ending, Pip took the time to explore what it meant to be a trickster archetype in a variety of tales, but predominantly in the Puss in Boots story. Having never really sat down to read the original tale of Puss in Boots before, I thought this was a good time as ever to check it out. Additionally, this was a refreshing story to explore because it has been a while since we've looked at a story with a lot of modern media influence involved. And of course, referring to the DreamWorks version of Puss in Boots, which appears in the Shrek franchise. And we'll discuss that a little more. We'll discuss that version a little more later. But for now, let's focus on a much older version. Our story today is primarily pulled from Charles Perrault 1697 version of the tale, which was later translated into Andrew Lang's Blue Fairy Tale book. This is the most widely known version today, but the earliest version of this tale can be found in Giovanni Francesco Straparola's 1551 collection of tales, Pisavoli Noti, translated to The Pleasant Nights. Fox, how familiar are you with Puss in Boots? Like, this is a more iconic tale. I was curious as to how familiar you are with it.
I think early on when we were doing the podcast, we did come across a couple of Perrault's different stories, because we did end up doing Donkey Skin. And I think around that time we did look at Puss in Boots briefly. And one thing I do remember from that is that Puss in Boots is kind of a trickster character, like you said, but he wasn't popular around Europe. I think it was mainly Western Europe where you saw cats and the cat character, which is what turns into the Puss in Boots type. So we do have all the different archetypes, and I think for him it was the cat as the helper, and then you also have the cat as a trickster. Whereas in other parts in Europe and around the world, we've talked about the trickster characters tons. I think we have the fox, we have the jackal, we have the tortoise in some of them. They aren't the original hero, and they oftentimes don't mean to be, but in some stories, they do end up as the helper character just by default, but they always have a fun flair to them. And, of course, I remember Puss in Boots from the Shrek franchise, one of my favorite fairy tale retellings. I think, was it Antonio Banderas who does his voice? No.
Yes. Yeah, you're correct.
Is it?
It is Antonio Banderas. He's also, the thing that always got me as a kid, it was like one of those first moments where I was able to put together, like recognize the voice enough to know he was an actor in another movie, i.e. Spy Kids. So that was always a fun thing for me, being like, oh, Puss in Boots is actually the dad spy. He's so cool.
I fell in love with Antonio Banderas in Spy Kids. He was so charming, so funny.
Yeah.
And he was barely in it, right? I think the mom and dad were barely in it. But I loved them so much, even as kids. Oh. And then, of course, when I heard him in Puss in Boots, I was like, oh my God, it's Antonio Banderas. And I was so excited. And then also, I think there was a couple things about Puss in Boots in the Shrek movies where it kind of subverted your expectations of what he was going to do. Oh, so I think it was so well done.
Did you ever see Zorro, the Legend of Zorro movie?
Yes.
Yeah, see, I had also seen that, and I was just like, it's just so funny, like, seeing this actor clearly just reprise his role just as an animated cat form, and I was like, I'm here for it.
See, I did it the other way. I watched Shrek first, and then later on, I watched The Mask of Zorro, The Legend of Zorro. And I was like, oh, it's his Puss in Boots character.
Yeah, the creators were like, you know what? We just want this character to live on. And if we have to animate it like in this particular way, so be it. And it's just so funny because that his Puss in Boots character has just lived on way past Zorro, but it's pretty much a parody or like a continuation of his other role. The character was such a fun addition to that movie, and it was just so, I think, needed, especially when, like, Shrek 2, like, the way Shrek 2 went, which is so weird, because I feel like oftentimes in sequels, they usually throw in a fun character for the sake of having a fun character, but don't actually have any particular role for them to fill. They just wanted, like, another big-name actor or whatever in the show. But in that one, it was really helpful because he was like the one character who didn't drink the potion and go through those shenanigans. So he was like, guys, what are we doing? Let's think about this for 2 minutes.
I did think it was funny that Puss in Boots got his own kind of sequels and Donkey didn't.
Right?
I think Donkey was set up to be but to be fair, Donkey had his story. I feel like if they had the story with Donkey, then they couldn't have done the Shrek movies with Shrek and Fiona and their kids, because then it would have been just everyone having kids, and I don't think they thought there'd be a market for that.
And yeah, they had really set up this swashbuckler character in Puss in Boots to really have, like, you really believe he would have his own adventures without Shrek. So yeah, it kind of made sense, but I still didn't think he was going to be popular enough to get his own, not one, but 2 spin-off movies.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard good things about the second one as well, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, let's just talk about here. We're already here. It's like, whatever. Okay, but you'd seen the first one. The first one has really nothing to do with the story, nor does the second one. They really... That's the other thing that's surprising. I didn't rewatch Shrek 2 in prep for this, but I don't think at any point they actually reference his original story. They really are just like, here's a character, and we don't really care what actually his original tale was. We're just going to play with the character itself. Yeah, what did you think of the first movie? Because that was a spin-off that had no right to be good.
I mean, to be fair, I don't remember much from it. I think it did come out during a point when I was kind of over the Shrek movies. I really enjoyed the first Shrek movie, really enjoyed the second one. I still think I enjoyed the third one. And then I think there was a couple like holiday specials that I watched, and then it kind of felt forced after that. And so I think when I watched Puss in Boots, I enjoyed it. I liked the animation style. I liked the story. I liked I think it was like a dance-off they had. But in general, I don't remember much from it because it just doesn't like stick in my mind as a memorable movie that I've seen.
And honestly, I don't think it should. I watched it for this, and it was just kind of an okay film. Like, it didn't do a ton, but maybe I liked it more than Shrek 3 and 4 because my childhood nostalgia is for 1 and 2, so 3 and 4 was just the wrong age. So to me, on some level, they're blasphemy. I'm sure I've heard people really stand up for 4, and maybe it's fine, but my nostalgia won't let me admit that or think that. So I kind of felt like it was better than what I expected from a spinoff. But then the sequel I thought was way too good to be a spinoff. Again, not actually I think the masterpiece it's being built up to be, but like considering it's like what the second installment in a spinoff series and the 6th installment in an overall big animated series that's come like 11 years or 12 years from the most recent film in that franchise. Like, it had no right to be good, and yet it was.
I feel like they always do that, though. It's always the ones that you think, okay, there's not going to be much here. I'll watch it because there's nothing else to watch, or with kids or whatever, and then all of a sudden you're like, wow, this is a really good movie.
Yeah, and I really liked the art style. I'm really enjoying everything post Into the Spider-Verse. I'm really liking seeing like different studios try different effects, because before it felt like all the movies were really looking the same, the animated ones anyways. So I'm really appreciating seeing them do a bit different stuff, though I felt like they could have played more into it. Like, I think they should have stayed with the traditional CGI type animation, but then only use that interesting vibe once like death was involved. But they did a very good job for a kids movie to just deal with the fact death is always like stalking him. It was like, how kids are gonna get scarred by this wolf 100%. Like, it was well done. It did freak me out once or twice too. I was like, dang it, man, what are you doing? Well, death is coming for us all.
I did see the trailer, and that it does look kind of scary. And doesn't he have a panic attack or something in it? I remember that was like a big thing.
He has several panic attacks. And he's always running away. And they do a really good job. I'm so glad I wasn't wearing my headphones when I was watching the movie, because it really does a good emphasis of that, like, heartbeat, like, boom, 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 boom. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is freaky. This is real. Like, you really buy into the fear, not just for Puss in Boots, but you can see how this would just terrify anybody going into it. The moment I most appreciated with him is at one point, like, once again, Puss has kind of seen Death and is like, we gotta run, we gotta get out of here. But Death doesn't really chase him in that moment. He picks up 2 coins and put them on his eyes, and he just kind of does his, like, signature whistle. And I'm like, ooh, I love the call to Charon, like, of coins on your eyes, like, going down the river Styx. Very subtle, but a very good image to, yeah, Death is coming for you, man.
I mean, that's just so scary.
Right? I was just like, I'm sure there's a bunch of kids who are like, why on earth did he put coins on his eyes? But I was like, he's like every iteration of Death. You need to get out of there, man.
Oh, it's always worse when they don't chase you, because you always know they're going to either appear in front of you or It's when you think you've lost them and they're going to show up, and I hate the jump scares.
And I was doing a little digging into it, like after I watched it, and some of the comments had pointed out that in the beginning scenes of the movie, you can see Death in the crowds before he had been formally introduced. Like, he was there before Puss had met him, or even had gone through his eighth life type deal.
Oh.
Like, he was always coming for him. It was like, oh my gosh. Like, to think that through is those attentions to detail that make that movie interesting.
Like, someone really put love and thought and care into this.
Yeah, and one of the few times I feel like in animated movies, the villain is really one note and I really just don't care about them. They did do a good job. There's like two sets of villains. One is straight up evil. He's voiced by John Maloney, which is like really hard to take seriously. It's like, okay, dude, you're evil. I believe you, sure. But then the other one is Goldilocks. But they do a very good job, I felt, of conveying her story, of being very kind of actually sympathetic and having a good heel turn at the end of like, no, I'm not going to be straight up evil. I'll just be kind of bad, but not straight up evil.
I do like how in a lot of these movies, even in Hoodwinked, I don't know if you remember Hoodwinked.
Oh, yeah, I remember Hoodwinked.
But even like Hoodwinked, you find out like it's someone who you don't expect it to be. And I think I love it when fairy tale retellings do stuff like that, where it's kind of like you see the same characters, but they are in a new light and they have all these grievances, and they should have all these grievances. But I find that that's so interesting. And that's one of the things I really like about when fairy tale retellings don't just take the exact same thing and rehash it, but they add a new twist to it.
Yeah, it's one of those things I think Shrek, the series, really kicked off. Like, it was the first of its kind to really just take apart the fairy tale. I should say the first to do it in terms of, like, big blockbuster style. I'm sure there was people taking apart fairy tales beforehand, but, like, that became part of the cultural zeitgeist of, like, let's take fairy tales and rethink how they're actually being portrayed and set up. And with that, dear travelers, it's time to put on our best boots, preferably the ones made for listening, as we tell the tale of Puss in Boots. There was once a poor miller who had 3 sons. When he passed away, he only had 3 things to leave behind as inheritance. The oldest son received the mill, the second son received a donkey, and the third son received a cat. The third son wallowed in his rotten luck as his brothers could combine their gifts to make a living. However, he could not gain anything with just a simple cat. Now, clearly, the third son was not a cat person, or else he would have seen what a great gift a cat can be. But alas, this was before the internet, so he could not make money with simply just having a cute cat and posting photos of it. The cat heard his concerns, but pretended not to. Instead, the cat told the miller's son that he was more fortunate than he thought to have him. The cat told the son that he didn't need to do anything but give him a bag and a pair of boots. Now, in the Italian version of the tale, the cat is actually a fairy disguised as a cat, which is why the cat is able to be such a trickster-type character. But I think it's kind of more fun thinking it's just a random animal talking and being clever. But we see that in a lot of other fairy tales, so most people don't really blink an eye at this type of trope happening. The cat's master didn't feel too reassured by this. He did know that the cat was clever, and he had seen him play a great many tricks to catch his prey. So he thought he'd be better with the aid of the cat's mischief rather than just wallowing in his own despair. So the cat's master received the requested items, and the cat looked very gallant as he donned the boots and a bag. Now that our protagonist has acquired his iconic outfit, he sets out to a nearby warren where rabbits roamed. He gathered bran and sow thistle and placed it in his new bag, put the bag around his neck, and then he laid down. He stretched out at his full length to feign death. Patiently, the cat waited until a young naive rabbit hopped along. Unfamiliar with the cat's deceit, the rabbit investigated the bag to see what was inside. But once the rabbit stuck its head in the bag, the cat sprung into action and swiftly killed it. Now, to me, this is the most fantastical element of the story, in my opinion. All cats I know have always, played a lot with their food before killing it, so to see it just be so swift, I'm like, whoa, you mean business, cat?
Inaccuracies.
Right? I want a rewrite where he bats it around for 2 hours and leaves it half dead for a bit until it dies slowly and then takes it.
Yeah, cats aren't very nice.
No, they're real jerks.
Mm-hmm.
Proud of his work, Monsieur Puss put his prize into his bag and took off for the castle, where he requested an audience with the king. Apparently, this is one of those fairy tales where talking animals are quite common, for this request was granted, and he was soon before the king. Bowing before his majesty, Puss in Boots spoke. I have come to present you with this rabbit of the warren, which my noble lord Marquis of Carabas has commanded me to present to your majesty from him. The king graciously accepted and told Monsieur Puss to convey his gratitude to his lord. Sometime after this, Puss hid amongst tall stalks of corn with his bag open. After a short time, a pair of partridges flew into the tall corn and were swiftly caught in the bag. Just as before, Puss presented his game to the king as a gift from his lord. The king once again received the gift with pleasure, and this time he also gave him some money for his troubles. This cycle repeated for 3 months. The cat would cleverly catch some wild game and present it to the king on behalf of his master. One day, the cat learned that the king would be traveling along the riverside with his daughter. And because this is a fairy tale, she is, of course, the most beautiful princess in the world. There were no pictures of her in my copy of the story, so we'll just need to take the story's word for it.
Nope, it's always the most beautiful.
Have we ever had a story where we're like, and there's a princess. She's all right. Moving on.
Well, if everyone has the most beautiful girl, then no one has the most beautiful girl.
Hearing this, the cat knew it was time to move to the final stage of his plan. First, he went to his master and told him that they were in the endgame, and he need only listen to him, and his fortune would be made. The cat directed the miller's son to a specific part of the river and instructed him to wash himself there. Without really knowing why he needed to do this or what good can come of it, the Marquis of Carabas did as the cat instructed. While he was washing himself and wondering how he got to this moment in his life, the king passed by. Puss cried out to the king, "Help, help, my lord Marquis of Carabas is going to drown." At this, the king looked out and recognized the cat who had brought him such good game for the last few months. He immediately ordered his guard to help the lord and fish him out of the river. After the guards left, the cat explained that thieves had came while his master was washing and stole his clothes despite his loud shouts. It's at this point we briefly flash back to earlier when Puss hid his clothes before the king arrived. So the king ordered his servants to fetch one of his finest suits for the lord to wear. It's at this point in the story we learn that the miller's son, i.e. Lord Marquis of Carabas, is actually really handsome and well built, but that only becomes apparent after putting on really fine clothes provided to him. And his looks were not lost on the princess, who takes great interest in the new lord. The king then invites him to join them in the coach as they continue their outing. The cat, quite overjoyed with how well things were progressing, agreed on behalf of the Marquise. Before the coach started moving once more, Puss traveled on ahead to meet with some countrymen who were tending to a meadow. He told them if they do not tell the king that the meadow they are tending to belongs to his lord Marquis of Carabas, they shall all be chopped as small as herbs for the pot. Sure enough, when the king passed by the meadow, he asked one of the countrymen who the field belonged to, and altogether they answered, Marquis of Carabas. Apparently, the cat's threats made them all terribly afraid, and they dared not cross him. Meanwhile, up ahead, the master cat spoke to reapers in the field and told them that if they do not tell the king that the cornfields they are working for belonged to his lord, Marquis of Carabas, they shall all be chopped as small as herbs for the pot. And once again, when the king arrived, he asked who the fields belonged to, and these workers told him it was owned by Marquis of Carabas. So this repeats several more times as the cat continued on ahead, and countrymen kept claiming lands belonging to Marquis of Carabas. And the king became very impressed with the vast estates owned by the cat's lord. This does feel like a con that is destined to fall apart, like, so quickly.
I feel like it's one of those heist ones where, like, as they're talking about the plan, you're like, I see multiple ways this could fail. Oh, I was going to say, do you remember Road to El Dorado?
El Dorado? Yes.
Where they keep coming up with these cons, and you keep going like, okay, this is eventually going to get them in trouble. That's what it kind of feels like.
Yeah, I feel like the only thing going for it is the fact that Puss in Boots has not laid out his plan to us. Because you know how, like, the moment a character lays out the plan, that's the moment you know it's going to fail. If they don't tell you, it should be fine. But also, I feel like he's putting too much faith in the miller's son, i.e. the Lord Marquis of Carabas, because it's like, maybe tell him anything. He's just like, just do this one thing, wash yourself right here, and, like, that's it. He could so easily have bumbled this, be like, the countrymen being like, yes, it's owned by the Lord, and he's like, really? Oh my goodness. He's like one slip up away. Eventually, Puss came to a grand castle, which was ruled by an ogre. But not just any ogre. This was the richest ogre known to man, for he owned a great deal of land, including all the land the countrymen have claimed so far to be owned by Marquis of Carabas. Having learned of the ogre beforehand, the master cat confidently approached the castle. He requested to speak with the owner so he could pay his respects. And as civilly as an ogre could, he was welcomed in and invited to sit down. The cat remarks that he has heard tale of the ogre's incredible ability to transform into any creature he could think of, even if it were to be as big as a lion or an elephant. The ogre told him that this was true and proved it so by changing into a lion. Puss became quite terrified at the sight of the lion and tried to run and hide in a gutter. He even tripped over his boots on the slick tile surface as he scrambled into his hiding place. Shortly after, the ogre returned to his original form and Puss bashfully returned to the table. The cat remarked that he was impressed with the ogre's abilities, but he had also heard that the ogre can transform into the smallest animal like a rat or a mouse, though Puss admits that he thinks this to be impossible. Enraged by this doubt, the ogre tells the cat that of course he can and he's going to show him. As soon as he transformed himself into a small mouse, Puss pounced upon him and ate him up.
I mean, it worked.
I mean, that one seemed a little like a gimme, like transform into a mouse in front of a cat.
Yep. Couldn't have seen anything wrong coming with that.
Nope. How? Not a possibility. I also just love this, like, I'm going to prove you wrong, and I'm going to demonstrate it right here. It's like, this is a random cat, dude. Don't worry about it. It's about this time that Puss heard the approach of the king's coach. The master cat rushed out to greet the king and welcomed him to the castle of his lord Marquis of Carabas. The king was awed by the stately castle and buildings surrounding it. When they entered the main dining hall, they found a feast had already been prepared. It turns out the ogre had planned for his friends to come that day, and so the castle had already been prepared for guests. Though those friends dared not come now, knowing that the king was present in the castle. At this point, the king was very impressed with Lord Marquis of Carabas, and his daughter was, and I quote from the text, violently in love with him. After a few drinks, the two were married that very day, and Puss in Boots became a great lord, and he never need to run after mice anymore, unless, of course, he wished to chase them for fun. And that is the story of Puss in Boots.
I feel like this could have easily become part of Shrek.
Right? This is the thing. It's like, why wasn't any of this included?
There's even an ogre.
Right? It's just, they were just like so close to it. I think it's because the Shrek version is more swashbuckler than trickster.
Yeah. And it makes more sense because he's got more of that, like, Musketeers thing going as opposed to, I guess, plus it would make, no, there's no justification for it. Give us the Puss in Boots story.
Right?
When you got to the part about the ogre, I was like, okay, but there's an ogre here. So why don't we just take the ogre from this story, add a miscommunication trope, and put it in Shrek?
Like, they could have so easily have been at least a little tongue-in-cheek with his first encounter with Shrek, having been like, oh, I heard you can do this. Like, at least start to play up like he's going to do the same thing, and then it could fall apart real quick and be like, okay, we'll move on.
I guess maybe they had to balance how many different fairy tales they could tell.
Yes, but this was a great one.
This was, and it's just so different. Well, it's different in the sense that from what we've been doing recently.
It's true. I love cats. I feel like I've been checking this out. I feel like I have put forth like 2 or 3 cat stories at this point, and this just feels like the crescendo of it all. I'm like, and here we have Puss in Boots doing his thing, and it's just fun.
Everywhere around the world, people like cats.
It's true, though. And I'm like, why was this miller's son upset? You won the lottery. You got a cat. A talking cat at that. But I also just want to point out, I love so much that this story, like, the love story in this is just so funny to me. Because, like, the guy did not set out to have a wife or anything. He was just like, I need to make a living. And, like, I'm not sure how to do that with just a cat. And the cat's like, hold my milk. It's fine. I got this.
You want a wife? Okay, I'll get you one. Don't worry.
He's like, you're going to stand right here. Just wash up, stand right here. Everything's going to work out. Next thing he knows, he's in a carriage with really fine clothes next to the most beautiful princess in the land. And the text is like, she looks at him and is like enamored with him and shortly after falls in love with him. And then the last paragraph of the story is like, she's violently in love with him. And it's like, okay, I think these are some red flags, actually. You might want to be worried.
He's attractive and he's poor. It's the whole uptown, downtown kind of vibe. West Side Story. But the Puss in Boots edition.
He started that carriage ride like completely broke with absolutely nothing and then ended with a title, a ton of land, an amazing castle, and a wife.
This is how you get the girl. You get a cat first.
Right? Anyways, I was quite happy. I did not know what to expect when I first read the story, and I was not disappointed.
I really enjoyed that as well. I mean, I didn't really know what the original story was, and this is not what I expected, so...
Yeah. Right? But I love it. It's once again playing into that trickster trope. Mm-hmm. The whole reason Puss ends up really doing this is kind of like his pride is hurt. He's like, you don't think I can be better than a donkey in a mill? Watch me, bro.
Wow.
And
are you underselling me?
And it even ends with like clearly staying, and then the cat became a lord and he never needed to worry about like food ever again, essentially. That's a big upgrade for you too, but he didn't want to be king or anything. He's like, he knew better. He's like, that'd be work. You can marry the princess. You can do all the rulership, but I will get all the benefits. So yeah, that is our tale today. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. We'll be back next time for our more holiday themed episode. As we get closer and closer to that, I was gonna say spooky season. It's not spooky season.
To the new year.
Get closer to the new year.
And as always, if you want to see the show's summary or notes, please check those out on our website, www.talesfromenchanted.forest.com. If you do want to hear more from us, we are on pretty much every social media site, including Bluesky and Mastodon, at From Enchanted or at Tales from Enchanted Forest. However, if you are old school like Sparrow, you can always email us at talesfromenchantedforest@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your questions, comments, and suggestions, so if you have anything to share, please don't hesitate.
And remember, there's always a place for you in the Enchanted Forest.